If you are worried about having high blood levels of cholesterol on a carnivore diet, then this video is for you. Why should you listen to me? I was featured on the first ever carnivore TV show, Reverse TV series. I have a PhD in nutrition and exercise physiology from the University of Miami, and I've taught for over a decade at the University of Miami, Miami-Dade College, DeVry University, the American College of Sports Medicine, and helped thousands of clients. You can see some of the testimonials on my website. And most importantly, I've lost 30 pounds and managed to maintain it, mainly focusing on an animal-based approach. Let's first start with the importance of dietary cholesterol. It is crucial that we consume cholesterol from the diet, which is only found in animal sources, in order to improve our health, our mood, our hormones. And that all culminates in making it easier for us to lose weight, get healthier, and maintain the weight that we lost. Dietary cholesterol does not mean is going to affect your blood levels of cholesterol. I think this is a misnomer. People think that if they eat a lot of dietary cholesterol, that's going to increase their blood levels of cholesterol, and that's not necessarily true, especially the LDL, which is what most health experts have in the past termed as the bad cholesterol. Why is cholesterol important in the body? Cholesterol is recommended, it's the precursor for hormone production. So it's the raw material from which you create testosterone, DHEA, which is similar to testosterone, that it's an androgen or a male sex hormone. Both men and women have it. Dehydroepiandrosterone, or DHEA. Also, you need cholesterol to manufacture estrogen, to manufacture progesterone, which is why sometimes you see people when they go on a vegan diet, so they're not getting any dietary cholesterol from their diet, they end up sometimes losing their cycle because they just cannot manufacture estrogen, progesterone in optimal amounts anymore. You also need dietary cholesterol to make vitamin D. So even if you're exposed to the sun, it's going to be difficult to convert that sunshine, the UVB rays that are precursors for us, for our skin to create vitamin D. We need dietary cholesterol that would eventually lead to having enough in our blood. Cholesterol, upon exposure to UVB rays, will convert into vitamin D. So it's not just about getting sunshine. You also need to make sure you have cholesterol in your blood so that it gets activated by the UVB rays or the sunshine rays. And if you have glass, so if you're sitting across from a window, you're not getting the UVB rays, right? And so this is something really important to pay attention to. So all of these hormones are critical for helping you put on muscle, stay lean, have energy, and great mental health and clarity. And the truth is, within the scientific circles, it's not even controversial anymore. Even mainstream nutrition organizations have overturned their official upper limit or warning on how much you need to be consuming of cholesterol. It used to be set at 300 milligrams per day. Now they don't have that upper limit anymore. The problem is that 5 to really 7 decades of negative public health messaging around cholesterol is proving pretty hard to overturn and share that message to the general public. In 2014, the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, this is the committee that they put together around every 5 years to come up with the dietary guidelines for Americans. So every 5 years, we have updated official guidelines from the government. They're termed the dietary guidelines for Americans. So every 5 years, they publish a new set. And so they form a committee beforehand to update those guidelines. So in 2014, the committee significantly changed the dietary cholesterol recommendation, and they stated that, and I quote, cholesterol is not considered a nutrient of concern for overconsumption. Liver, it's true that our livers produce cholesterol, and that's usually the vegan argument, right? Is when vegans discount the need for dietary cholesterol consumption, they mention that, hey, your liver makes cholesterol, so you don't need to worry about getting it from the diet. But here's the other part of that dilemma. The liver can only make up to 75% of your body's needs for cholesterol. So this is just enough for you to not die. This is just enough for you to survive and not die. But what about those of us who want to optimize? We want to thrive. We don't want to just go through life trying not to die, right? So this is why supplementing your liver's production of cholesterol with actual dietary animal cholesterol is really important. Also, you may be interested in learning that 75% of heart attack patients were shown to have normal LDL cholesterol levels. And this is based off more than just one study. So several studies have shown that most folks who suffer a heart attack do not really have high LDL cholesterol as measured by the current recommendations of like what signifies a high cholesterol LDL level, which is 100 milligrams per deciliter to 130 milligrams per deciliter as the cutoff point, and you're supposed to have it below that. So in those studies, they showed that hospitalized patients with coronary artery disease, almost half of them had admission LDL levels of less than 100 milligrams per deciliter, whereas less than a quarter had LDL levels above 130 milligrams per deciliter. So that ends up being 3/4 of those patients who had a heart attack had normal or near optimal levels of LDL. They thought they did not have a high risk of cardiovascular disease. So all these patients were probably following the guidelines. They did not have a reason to be alarmed because mainstream medicine told them that you don't have high levels of LDL. And clearly now we know that that's not true. The tragedy of this study that I'm referring to, it's linked here below, is that the lead author of this study goes on to recommend as a conclusion that people should shoot for even lower levels of LDL or bad cholesterol in their blood instead of suggesting that, well, maybe LDL cholesterol is not the problem, right? Maybe that's not the culprit, especially as we see a lot of people with high LDL levels that are thriving and super healthy because they might have high blood levels of LDL cholesterol, but they have no inflammation and they're leading a healthy lifestyle, toxin-free lifestyle, active lifestyle. So all those things I think matter way more than your blood levels of cholesterol. Not only that, but low LDL levels are correlated in several studies with increased rates of cancer, cardiovascular disease, dementia, and Alzheimer's. As a matter of fact, if you're taking a statin, there's been shown that you have a 400% increased risk of Alzheimer's and dementia just because you're taking a statin, which is a medication that drops your LDL blood levels of cholesterol. And all cause mortality rates go up the lower your LDL levels of cholesterol are. So it's not really about LDL cholesterol levels, right? It's rather the damage and the inflammation and the oxidation that's happening to your LDL cholesterol particles in your blood that's really driving heart disease. How can you damage your LDL particles? How can you damage the cholesterol that's flowing through your blood? By increasing your consumption of sugars and some forms of carbohydrates and ultra processed foods consumption. Stress, consuming seed oils like canola oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, cottonseed oil, peanut oil, which are grapeseed oil, which are so commonly found in almost all processed foods. Environmental toxins, poor gut health, hormonal imbalances, mold toxicity, nutrient deficiencies, all those things drive inflammation to an alarming level, at which point I'm very concerned about the health and quality of your LDL particles, and then thus your risk for heart disease. Also, if you have been exposed to mold, you have SIRS or mold illness, make sure you haven't been exposed to mold in your environment, which could also artificially inflate your LDL numbers. So normally when you go to a doctor or you get your yearly checkup, they'll run a traditional blood lipid panel, and that includes total cholesterol. And according to the official recommendations, total cholesterol is supposed to be less than 200 milligrams per deciliter. LDL should be less than 100 milligrams per deciliter. HDL cholesterol should be higher. HDL is the good cholesterol, should be higher than 60 milligrams per deciliter. And it'll also contain triglyceride tests, which again, according to the official recommendations, this one I can stand behind, the HDL and the triglyceride. The triglyceride should be less than 150 milligrams per deciliter. What we have seen in the low carb community is that when people go keto or carnivore, basically you're eliminating carbohydrates to less than 25 grams of carbs per day or less. what we've seen in those communities is that around 30% of people following those low carb diets or very low carb diets, around 30% of them only will have a rise in their LDL cholesterol levels, especially if they are very lean. So they might fall under the subgroup of the population called the lean mass hyperresponders. We're not 100% sure what that really means in terms of ultimate health and heart health, but it seems like they're thriving for the most part. Now, triglyceride to HDL ratio is a much better measure of your risk for heart disease. So if you only have access to your lab tests and you only have the traditional blood lipid panel that you have the results for, then you can look at it. Remember, it's got LDL, HDL, triglyceride in it. So you look at the HDL and you look at the triglyceride. You get the triglyceride, you divide it by HDL, you get then and then you'll get a ratio. If your triglyceride number divided by HDL number is below 2, then that's great. You're in the clear. You have no insulin resistance. That's optimal health. And I wouldn't worry, even if LDL seems to be a little high. Also, if it's not good right now, then usually what I've seen is that people who start and continue a keto and a carnivore diet, this ratio keeps getting better because triglycerides keep dropping and HDL keeps going up, and so the ratio will improve. Personally, my triglycerides used to be really high, and they dropped to 45 milligrams per deciliter on keto and then carnivore, which is something that is very hard to achieve while I was trying to eat all the carbs and all the whole grains that I was taught when I was classically trained as a dietitian, right? And I was taught to eat 7 to 8, if not more, depending on the physical activity levels, servings of grains and carbs, and just my triglycerides kept going up. It was a really bad situation. Lipoprotein A. This is something that's a little disclaimer here. If you have high rates of heart disease in your family or just in general, I would recommend everybody at least once in their lifetime order this test, lipoprotein A, LPA. Um, it's kind of like a genetic test if you want to see if you are just genetically at a higher risk for heart disease. This specific subtype of LDL, the lipoprotein A, which is very similar to LDL, it can significantly increase your risk for cardiovascular disease. And that's because it's very small in its size. And so it can get stuck in your arteries and your blood vessels very easily. And that means it gets kind of stuck away from the protection of the antioxidants in your blood that can normally protect it. How can you lower it? Not smoking, no tobacco products, exercising regularly, maintaining a healthy weight, eliminating inflammatory foods like, again, seed oils, processed foods, sugars, um, grains, managing your blood pressure and diabetes. The cool thing is that blood pressure drops significantly the moment you eliminate carbohydrates or drop them significantly. As a matter of fact, I have a disclaimer. If I'm working with somebody who is taking medication for blood pressure, I have to caution them because their blood pressure tends to normalize so quickly. So if they're still taking medication to drop their blood pressure and now their blood pressure has normalized because they started keto or carnivore, it's a problem because the blood pressure is going to drop way too low at this point. And managing stress. Okay, here's what I would recommend. If your blood lipid panel is showing really high levels of total cholesterol and high levels of LDL and you are scared, then I would then order an NMR test, nuclear magnetic resonance lipoprotein profile test. This is a more advanced test for your blood lipids. It includes all the traditional blood lipid panel. It will test for LDL, HDL, and triglyceride and total cholesterol. But it also tests for the size of the LDL particles, which is a far more powerful way to assess the risk for cardiovascular disease. So it's going to test for how much of the subtype of LDL called small dense LDL you have in VLDL. They're very small particles of LDL. As we mentioned earlier, the smaller the size, usually the higher chance you have of being vulnerable to heart disease and cardiovascular disease, so strokes and heart attacks. Now, if the results of the NMR test reveals that you have high levels of small dense LDL and high levels of VLDL, I still would not panic at this point. I would order one more test to see overall inflammation levels in your body, and that is the high sensitivity CRP test, high sensitivity C reactive protein test. The high sensitivity CRP or HSCRP test measures low levels of CRP. CRP is a protein that increases in your blood with more inflammation. So the more inflammation, or if you have an infection, the higher the level of inflammation you have in your body, the higher the CRP numbers get. I prefer the HSCRP than the regular standard CRP test, so the high sensitivity CRP as opposed to regular CRP test, because it is more accurate and it can check for very, very low levels of CRP. So you can see if you're already trending towards low levels of inflammation, we can see if we're going into an even lower level of inflammation by using HSCRP testing. What are the results, or what should the results look like? If your HSCRP test shows that your number is less than 1 milligram per liter, that's fantastic. Oftentimes, with people who are really, really healthy, very lean, exercising, not eating processed foods, minimizing or not eating carbs at all, they tend to have it in 0.5 even or less. If your HSCRP level reveals a number of 1 to 3 milligrams per liter, that's average risk, and greater than 3 is high risk. I recommend getting your own testing if it's hard to convince your physician. Although I think with the NMR testing and the HSCRP testing, those things are becoming more and more physicians are progressing in their views and they will order it. You might need to convince them. A little bit of prodding might be necessary, and insurance companies will usually cover them. So you might not have to go and order them on by yourself. You might be able to have your insurance companies cover those tests. But if you cannot achieve that goal, then you can always go to ownyourlabs.com. This was founded by cardiovascular health researcher Dave Feldman, and it doesn't require a physician's prescription, and it's very cheap. So you don't it's ridiculously cheap, honestly, to order all of those. Now, if you need more help in this area, if you still need more guidance when it comes to looking over your labs or starting or maintaining a certain meal plan, I work with people from all walks of life, with people who follow all kinds of diets, and I can offer you that support and that help with coaching. So you can check out my website, drzaldivar.com/coaching, drzaldivar.com/shop for my guides, especially the brain and addiction guides. Check out the dopamine brain. I would recommend starting there if you're finding it difficult to overcome cravings and stick to a certain meal plan. That's kind of my specialty, and that was the topic of my dissertation for over 6 years, starting in 2014, 2015, where I studied dopamine and raising baseline dopamine levels to treat food addiction. And what I would recommend you watch next is this video on high blood glucose levels on long-term strict carnivore diet. You might find a lot of value in interpreting your labs further with that video. And if you enjoyed this kind of content, let me know, so I make sure that I film additional lab-related content for you. Thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit that little notification bell icon so YouTube alerts you every time I post a new video.